94.3 The Dude is very grateful to our men and women in uniform. We're proud to recognize local members of our military by turning the spotlight on them right now in our Soldier Salute.
I'm your host, Sergeant First Class Retired Don Sorensen, and this week on the Soldier Salute, we've got a very special event coming up. It's Fort Jackson's Come Meet Your Army Tour. Here to talk with us about that is United States Army veteran Tom Byrd. Tom, tell me about yourself.
Well, I'm the community relations officer currently for Fort Jackson. So we coordinate all the different events that go on, on Fort Jackson and off the installation as well. 28 and a half years in the Army. I enlisted back in 1986 and then retired as a captain after I commissioned in 2010. I retired in 2007. I retired in 2015. So been a public affairs officer in the Army and then a public affairs specialist since retiring.
Now, were you public affairs as enlisted also, though, weren't you?
Yes. I had combat camera and broadcast, and I was also in the infantry, and I was also a topographic surveyor. So I have a very diverse background in the Army and a lot of different places that I got to go and a lot of different things that I got to do. So becoming a public affairs officer was perfect for me because I knew what the Army did.
Tom, I would imagine your years of experience with public affairs, both officer and enlisted, set you up perfectly to be able to talk about the Come Meet Your Army Tour that's coming up on Fort Jackson. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
So what we do is we try to put on the Come Meet Your Army Tours so that members of the Columbia community and the Midlands in general can come on and see what we do on the installation. Brigadier General Beagle has said numerous times since taking command in June that, we are the American People's Army. Fort Jackson belongs to the community, and we want people to come onto the installation to see what we do. We're very proud of what we do at Fort Jackson, and we like to show people what goes on there.
Tom, as an enlisted soldier, you spent some time at Fort Jackson, so I imagine you've got some great insights as to what our guests can expect at the Come Meet Your Army Tour. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the first half of that day?
I was a drill sergeant at Fort Jackson before I went to OCS. What we do at Fort Jackson primarily is we train basic combat training. All the soldiers that come into the Army, the enlisted soldiers, go through basic combat training, whether it's here, whether it's at Fort Leonard Wood, Fort Sill, or Fort Benning. But over half of the soldiers come through Fort Jackson. So what we do there and what they get to see when they come for the Come Meet Your Army Tour is we'll pick them up about 7 o'clock during daylight savings time. It's kicked back to 8 o'clock, but we'll pick them up at 7 at the gate. We'll bring them over to the 120th Reception Battalion where they'll get to see what it's like when an individual comes off the bus with their long hair and still wearing civilian clothes and kind of the process that they go through for that initial indoctrination in the Army where they get their shots and uniforms and obviously the haircut. Then we have a command briefing, usually by our Deputy Commanding Officer, Colonel McLam, and then from there we go to graduation. Kind of you get to see the first day and the last day at Fort Jackson in the course of about 3 hours, and then a lot of the stuff that goes on in between. At graduation, what they get to see is a battalion, usually 5 companies, coming out onto the field and where they'll march past everyone sitting in the bleachers, and they'll get to see how proud the families are and how proud those soldiers themselves are for making it to that point.
Tom, the Come Meet Your Army Tour is just a full day of activities for the guest, kicking off with that arrival at Fort Jackson and then immediately going into graduation. But it's the stuff that happens in between the arrival and graduating that I imagine most of our folks want to see. So tell me about that.
We generally go to one of the training events, be it the Confidence Tower, that's the rappel tower, or the Confidence Course, which, a bunch of different obstacles that they'll run through. We go to a barracks tour where they'll get to see how soldiers live and the different equipment that they wear, like their Army combat helmet, combat vest with the plates in it. We also take them to the rifle simulator where they will get to shoot a simulated rifle. It's the same rifle, but it's kind of a video game type thing, and get to see how that works. One of the most important things that everybody always hears about, they say in the Army that chow is mighty fine. We believe that. We want people to come through, see how soldiers eat. So if they come to the Come Meet Your Army Tour, they'll have the opportunity to eat in a dining facility. That's pretty much the gist of the day and what all we do. And we really want to see people come out and see what we do, because we're proud of what we do. And it's America's Army. It's not our Army, even though we served in it. Some of us still serve. It's the Army of the American people, and we want to show it to them.
Tom, when a basic trainee shows up at Fort Jackson, they're given everything that they need, from their boots to the uniform that they're wearing. However, our guest may not really be familiar with the terrain or what to expect while they're at Fort Jackson for the Come Meet Your Army tour. Why don't you give us a little bit of insight as to what would be an appropriate attire for this event?
Generally, we want people to wear appropriate clothing for the weather and wear comfortable shoes, because it's not a lot of walking, but it is walking. You'll get on the bus, we'll take you over to the reception battalion, and you'll walk around there a little bit, and that's kind of more of an office environment type thing. But comfortable clothing, dress for the weather. If it's going to rain, bring an umbrella. If it's, 98 degrees and 98% humidity out, shorts are appropriate if that's what you want to wear, sleeve shirt, obviously, but, dress appropriately for the weather. September, when the one that we have coming up, it'll still be fairly warm here. So, try to be comfortable.
Tom, I'm so excited about the Come Meet Your Army tour. I think it's a fantastic way for the citizens of South Carolina to actually salute our soldiers that train here in Fort Jackson, South Carolina. But one of the things I'm most excited about is that you don't just have the opportunity to see how the modern soldier trains, but you also get to look at the history of training at Fort Jackson, don't you?
Absolutely. One of the things that's part of the tour that you get to come out and do is we have the U.S. Army's Basic Combat Training Museum on Fort Jackson. There are actually 4 museums on Fort Jackson, but for this tour, you go to the Basic Combat Training Museum. It shows the 101 years of basic training that Camp Jackson started back in 1917. You progress through to see what basic training was like during World War II, the years in between World War II and Korea to Vietnam to, today's Army. So it's got everything in there, from the types of uniforms they wore to the weapons they used, the tents that they slept in, and all of that. So it just by itself is a really good thing to go see, but that's also part of our Come Meet Your Army tour.
Now, Tom, if our listeners want to find out more information about the Come Meet Your Army tour, where can they go?
Well, there's 2 places they can go to. One is the Fort Jackson Facebook page. And then on the Fort Jackson Facebook page, we have the events section. So the September 20th Come Meet Your Army tour is already posted on there. And if they have more questions, they can call to the Community Relations Office, which is the office that I work in. And that number is 803-751-1474.
Okay. And for the Facebook page, because I know I've looked at Fort Jackson, just looking that up on Facebook, and there's a bunch of them out there. So I would recommend listeners type in Fort Jackson Public Affairs Officer just in Google, and then follow their link to Facebook. It's by far the best social media site that they have.
Yeah, that's the quick and easy way to get there.
Thanks for joining us in our Soldier Salute, presented by Little Pig's Barbecue. Serving Columbia since 1963 with that bodacious buffet. By Lexington Guns and Shooting Range. Veteran owned and operated. By Carolina Honda Powerhouse. Motorcycles, ATVs, and side-by-sides with discounts for all military personnel. And Dominion Energy. We depend on our servicemen and women, and they can depend on us.